The world of high-end digital to analog converters is filled with hype, misinformation, and outright deception. Audiophile forums will tell you that spending thousands on a boutique DAC will bring you sonic nirvana, but there's a dirty little secret that manufacturers don't want you to know. Nearly all of these DACs use the same chips from the same semiconductor giants like Texas Instruments and Cirrus Logic. The truth is, whether you buy a DAC for $200 or $10,000, the fundamental sound of the conversion is dictated by a mass-produced chip that cost just a few bucks. But why then do some people pay 40 grand for a DAC or even over 100 grand? You could literally buy a house for that amount of money. So what do you get for it? You get a nice case, maybe a screen, but mostly you're getting a bunch of audiophile mumbo jumbo. But sonically speaking, the core of the conversion is still just going to come down to the chip. And if you spent more than, say, €1,000 on a DAC, you've definitely just been sold snake oil. Whether you're a hi-fi guy or a mastering engineer, if you just want a stereo DAC, there's no reason why you would need to spend more than a couple of £100 from a competent manufacturer. The chips do pretty much all of the heavy lifting. So what are some of the most cutting-edge, state-of-the-art, mastering-grade chips currently on the market? So we've got the Texas Instruments PCM 1792 ADB, and that costs not much more than £10 retail. And then you've got the Cirrus Logic 43198, and that costs about a tenner as well. And even AKM's most expensive mastering grade flagship offering, which you get with their dual chip architecture, you need to get the AK4499EX DAC chip and the AK4191 modulator chip. Together, those two chips will set you back an eye-watering £50. So if most of the DACs on the market use the same kinds of chips, and those chips don't really cost all that much, even in the most expensive cases, how do some of these manufacturers of hi-fi and pro audio DACs justify their outrageous prices? Well, although the chips do all of the heavy lifting, that's not the complete product. Of course, you're going to need to put it in a case, you're going to need to have a high quality power supply, you're going to need to buy some bits and bobs, some RCA jacks, some XLR sockets, a power inlet, all of the bits that you need to finish it off. And there's considerable design work that goes into that, and the assembly cost, and you've got to ship it out, and you've got to distribute it, and you need some profit at the end of the day as well. So I'd never expect a high quality unit to cost €20. Even just one XLR socket costs €2. So the parts do add up. But at the end of the day, any decent manufacturer should be able to put together a high quality, transparent, mastering grade DAC for a couple of £100. And if not, then you're just simply speccing parts which are unnecessarily expensive and exotic and have no impact on the sound quality. I've got a couple of quick important announcements before continuing this video. So firstly, all of my free plugins are now notarized for Mac. So no more unidentified developer warnings. It's all legit and notarized in VST3 and audio unit form. You've also got the Windows versions, and for Linux, you can download the source code even, they're open source. Now, secondly, all of the people who bought an online course from me previously on the Thinkific platform, I've now transitioned all of your accounts over to my new website. So the Thinkific thing that's going to sunset soon. So you need to go over to my new website, apmastering.com, and everything is over there. Providing you've got the same email address you used to log in, you'll have all of the courses that you previously bought there ready to go. And thirdly, I've got new content over there. So anyone who's interested in seeing some content from me that's not over on this YouTube channel, I've got some free course content available over on my website. And I've got one of my courses, my mixed preparation for mastering course, is now just €2. It's almost free. So anyway, no further interruptions. Let's continue with this video. If a so-called high-end DAC has a boutique power supply, exotic op-amps, a fancy screen, and the entire case is milled out of a solid block of aluminium, well, sure, you can pay for that. But if you're under the impression that that will get you a better sound quality than a less expensive, well-designed DAC that uses a state-of-the-art chip, you just don't know anything about audio engineering. But this is where it gets interesting. Some hi-fi manufacturers deliberately don't use audio-grade chips. Their marketing says that they use industrial or military-grade chips instead, and this gives the illusion that they're higher quality or more rugged or expensive in some way. But the truth is, the industrial chips are made by the exact same semiconductor manufacturers that make the audio chips. So they just design them for laboratory test equipment for a different purpose than the audio chips. And the thing is, if they were somehow better, then Texas Instruments and Cirrus Logic, they could just use that same technology in their audio chips, but they don't. because it doesn't sound better. They're just designed for a different purpose. And the hi-fi companies that use the industrial chips, they claim they offer a more natural or more pure sound, or whatever marketing adjectives they want to use. But in the absolute best case possible, they would sound exactly the same as the best audio chips. And in the more likely case, they just sound worse, and they have more distortion and more undesirable artifacts as a result of using the wrong chips for the wrong purpose. If you want audio chips, use the audio chips. They're designed using the best technology from those same companies. So why would they just release some chips for some other grade of equipment that cost less or the same price that don't sound as good as the audio chips? No, they just make the best audio chips possible. But the biggest load of bullshit of all are the NOS DACs, the no oversampling DACs. And this is marketed as the purest, most raw way to hear the direct digital signal. No filtering, no oversampling, just the raw, pure, unadulterated digital signal. Doesn't that sound better? Well, if you're a layman, in theory, that sounds better, but in reality, it's bullshit. It just sounds worse. Without proper oversampling and low-pass filtering, you just create massive amounts of ultrasonic noise, which you then terrorize your amplifier with and terrorize your tweeters with. You get worse dynamic range because oversampling helps shift quantization error noise out of the audible frequencies. And if you want to know more about that, I made a whole video on the Nyquist theorem and delta sigma DACs. Whereas for normal people, digital audio isn't stair-stepped because low-pass filters exist. With a NOS R2R DAC, you are literally hearing the stair steps. More distortion is not somehow more natural, it's just more distortion. That's why literally every single sensible professional audio converter uses anti-imaging filters and oversampling, because without that, your signal is contaminated with high frequency crap. But what's dark about this is the fact that the manufacturers of NOS DACs obviously know this, but they sell their flawed designs anyway because audiophiles think that they're getting something special, and that is the definition of snake oil. So why do people swear by their overpriced DACs? Why do some people claim that NOS DACs sound more analog even though they measure horribly? The answer is expectation bias. If you spend a ton of money on something, your brain wants to justify it. And when you've spent hours trawling through forum posts about how magical the sound of R2R NOS DACs are or whatever, you'll just be convinced by that magic. Your ears will hear the magic. And anytime I talk about the psychological biases, I love to bring up the McGurk effect. And if you don't know what that is, let's have a look right now.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing bar with a B.
Blind tests have shown time and time again that people struggle to hear the differences between DACs, providing they are level matched. That's one of the main things that throws people off. They just don't level match properly, or they run it through some other signal chain and it's got some weird thing going on, or some EQ or something. No, if you just level match two DACs and listen to those DACs, most people cannot tell the difference. It's remarkable how many adjectives these hi-fi guys can come up with in creatively describing the unique characters of all of these different DACs. But when they are put in a blind test, they can't even hear the difference between two of them. If you search DAC reviews on YouTube, you can scroll through days of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these hi-fi DAC reviews from people saying that this DAC sounds creamy, or this one sounds lush, or this one sounds invigorating, or this one sounds ethereal. But the truth is, either these guys just don't know what they're talking about, or they're just getting sponsorship money to sell these DACs, and they've got affiliate links or whatever else down below. But the thing is, either a DAC is transparent, and you can't really tell the difference between that and something else which is transparent, or it's literally just like broken or poorly designed, because that's the only way that you can tell the difference, because it's poorly designed and it doesn't sound the way that it should sound. Because a decent DAC sounds transparent, and you can't tell the difference between transparent sounding DACs, because that's what the word means. That's what transparent means. If you could tell the difference, it wouldn't be transparent. That's the point. But we've already reached the technology to make transparent sounding DACs. The Texas Instruments, Cirrus Logic, ESS, all of these manufacturers of semiconductors have already sufficiently advanced their technology, especially AKM. Like, the dynamic range is already more than the dynamic range of the human ear. And you can just test this yourself. If you've got an ADC, or especially an audio interface like most people have in the studio world, you can just take the outputs and put them in the inputs and do a loopback test. You just record the output back into the input. And providing you've got a higher quality ADC, and that isn't 90% of the coloration, then you can probably hear how your DAC is holding up pretty well in a loopback test. And the thing is, unless you've got a really bad ADC, and I'll give you an example of something that actually sounds really bad. If you've got a high quality ADC and DAC, you can actually do several loopbacks before you start hearing the difference. And the more times you send it through, the worse and worse it gets. So if you start with 1 and you can't really hear it, maybe you'll hear it by 3, or if you don't, maybe you'll hear it by 5. But if you get to 10 and can't hear it, then that's outstanding. And if you want to take it one step further, you can also just phase reverse that with the original recording, and then you get the delta, meaning the difference, what the ADC and the D to A conversion stage has actually done to the sound. So let's do a blind test together now. What I'm going to do, I'm going to play both the original recording and the loop back recording. So it's gone out and back in my particular setup, which is a Motu 24AI and a TC Electronics monitor controller. Is a bit sort of old, so you should really be able to hear it with this. If it sounds bad at all, everyone should be able to hear this immediately. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flick between the two. So I'm going to play the original or the loop back, and I'm going to flick between these two recordings. And what you need to tell me, not which is which, you need to tell me how many times I have flicked back and forth between it. Because I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to put up on the screen A and B, because a lot of people I don't think will even be able to tell when I'm switching, let alone what one is A and B. They won't even be able to tell when I'm switching. So just let me know how many times have I switched. You don't even need to tell me which is A and B. Just tell me how many times have I switched back and forth between them. That is sufficient. So I'm going to put a poll, a link to a poll down below in the description of this video. So click that and you can vote on how many times I switch back and forth, if you can actually hear that difference. But please do click the Google poll in the video description. That will really help me out to understand the results from you guys. How many times I'm switching backwards and forwards, or if you couldn't hear the difference, let me know in that poll. If enough people answer that poll, then I'll make a follow-up video to this. So anyway, this was the video, and I hope you got something out with that. Let me know down below your opinions on DACs. Is it a scam when people are selling these overpriced DACs for thousands of euros, even some DACs over 100,000 euros for some of these DACs? Is that a scam? Let me know down below. And as I say, if we get enough answers to this poll, then I'll make a follow-up video.